Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be doing an album review. I'm going to be taking a look at this album, which is the new one by Elvis Costello and the Imposters, called The Boy Named If. So I'll just be doing the usual thing in this video, giving a bit of background information about the album, then showing you the vinyl records off it here, and then going over each of the album songs in detail. So this is Costello's 32nd studio album. He's had a huge career, slightly mostly great stuff. I mean, there's a couple of albums of his which I've maybe not connected with quite as much, but yeah, as I said, 32nd album, so yeah, he's been incredibly prolific over that amount of time. In a way, it is a kind of, I guess, a slight continuation of the last two albums, which have come out in quite quick succession. They've got kind of very similar kind of artwork to Look Now and Hey Clockface, and all three albums share the same producer, Sebastian Chris. But on this album, though, he is back with working with the Imposters, so they are essentially his backing band, containing two members of the Attractions, who, as I said, of course, have been his backing band from way back when, 1978, and the only difference is you've got Davey Farrar playing bass rather than Bruce Thomas, because they had Bruce Thomas and Costello had quite a falling out at some point in the the 1990s. But anyway, they're back together on this album, and it was recorded largely remotely, thanks to the COVID pandemic, so they're more recorded their parts separately. I must say, it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels very much like a live band, or just in a studio recording. It's very immediate, that's quite remarkable. And Costello has said about the album that the kind of rough sort of theme of it is about kind of growing up, sort of transitioning from kind of boyhood into manhood, and about that transition and kind of the different kind of challenges along the way. And as I said, also since Hey Clockface came out two years ago, not quite 2 years ago, he's released a Spanish reworking of this year's model. So I guess perhaps maybe revisiting that early album in his career, which had a lot more of a kind of punky kind of new wave sort of feel to it. Maybe some of that influence crept in on here, because certainly for me this is his most relentless upbeat album, and hooky album possibly since then, but certainly since Brutal Youth, I would say, which came out in the early 90s. But even that was kind of an outlier for its time. And sort of in terms of its critical response, it got, I would say, all round critical acclaim. I've not really seen a bad review of this at all. And commercially, it done very well for an Elvis Costello album. Reached number 6 here in the charts, which when you compare that to those two recent albums, Look Now got to number 14, which in itself was quite respectable, but but Hey Clockface got and only managed a woeful number 39. It was quite a big flop, that album. So very nice to see this one return Costello to the top 10. So let's just show you my vinyl copy of it here. This is just a standard vinyl. There was a few different versions of this out there. You could have got, there's a CD, and then there was a kind of picture book version as well, because he's wrote kind of stories to go along with some of these songs. But I didn't really need that, so I just got the normal vinyl. Nice gatefold to it there. And then they just got in inner sleeves here, so it is a double record, this. But it's only 13 tracks, so he's not packed it full of stuff like he does with some of his other albums. That's just what one of the records looks like there. No download code or anything, unfortunately, with this one. It's a bit of a shame. And then the other record looks like that, just a slightly different colour scheme, and the label, just the same kind of label there. So yeah, that's the vinyl record looked at. Okay, so I will now go over each of the album songs in detail. I will score each track out of 10, and then use those scores to give us a overall percentage marking for the album. Farewell, okay. So it kicks off with a song called Farewell OK, which is a real rocking start to the album. Kind of as soon as this song comes on, you can kind of tell this is a sort of slightly different vibe to those last two albums. Like sort of like, but like yeah, like it's a good track. This is a solid rocking song. This, I mean, it's not quite. I think it sounds sort of kind of similar in style to things like "Welcome to the Working Week," but it's certainly not a patch on that song in terms of like its songwriting, like and like its like kind of like lyrics. It's more like kind of just kind of like a straight ahead. Like a few kind of like sort of like rock and roll kind of lyrical kind of cliches in there. Like he's not trying to be too clever like in this one. He's basically just singing about kind of someone like who's like kind of like done him wrong. He says like, I thought you'd change and get a little humble. You strike a strange disposition like a drummer hits a cymbal. So I mean, there's some good sort of wordplay going on like in it, but I think like yeah, kind of subject wise, it is quite sort of just straight ahead. Like kind of like rock and roll song really, so I do quite like it, and yeah, it would get an 8 out of 10 from me. Next track up on the album is the title track, The Boy Named If, and this is a really like interesting song for me. Musically, it starts quite sort of brooding, a sort of slightly kind of darker sort of like vibe to it, but then like I said, you go through the song, you get some really kind of interesting kind of like melodic sections, and then some really kind of like some nice backing vocals on it like as well come in, and then some kind of like yeah, like it kind of gives it like a kind of more like accessible edge than some of like his more like recent work. And yeah, I think it's like a really nice song, a really like inventive song. Ends with some kind of tape loop sort of sounds, and that sounds a bit odd. Reminds me a bit of kind of like Godley and Creme like sort of style. Like but yeah, like really nice. So and yeah, for me, would get a 9 out of 10 for The Boy Named If. Next track up is called Penelope Halfpenny, and this song is apparently about one of his school teachers, and sort of like Elvis like had like a like a crush on her. Like he sings like on it, like the style and drama and the shape of her face disappeared with the dot off a decimal place. And musically, it's very upbeat. This one, it's quite a playful like arrangement. You've got like Steve Naive's kind of keyboard playing. Reminds me a lot of like the kind of tones he'd used on like this year's model. I'm not sure like, if it's like the same kit like he's using, but kind of very kind of similar sound like some stuff from that album. Musically, Costello kind of puts on a kind of slightly kind of, I guess, a bit of like a kind of mocking tone to like his voice. He sounds very kind of twee on it, and I guess it's maybe not like everyone's taste, but I do quite enjoy the song, and yeah, for me, would get a 9 out of 10 overall. All about the difference. Next track up is called The Difference, and this begins a little bit kind of stripped back. This one, you've really just got like an acoustic guitar, and then kind of Costello's voice really comes to the fore like on this one here. But then by the chorus, you got again some really nice kind of slightly kind of twinkly piano lines like from Steve Naive again. Reminds me a lot of like kind of echoes like Oliver's Army, like sort of like in terms like of like its music, and then like these sort of like jangly guitars like on it as well, or sort of like these sort of jaggy guitars going on it. Reminds me a bit of Blur actually, but of course they were hugely influenced like by Costello, so it is like he is sort of like going back and sort of like revisiting I guess the kind of musical style like which like that which is like the foundation like of like his career. For me, this is a decent song. It doesn't stand out quite as much as some of the other tracks which we'll get onto, but it is a really good song though still. So for me, The Difference would get an 8 out of 10. And the second side now opens up with a song called What If I Can't Give You Anything But Love. Now this is a more heavier and slightly progressive song, I would say. It is slower, this one, but it's definitely more rock based. You know, you've got a lot of guitars like on it, and it's quite an intense song as well. I'd certainly say the intensity of this is probably, I said, the most kind of intense kind of song he's done since things on like Blood and Chocolate album. And lyrically, it's about kind of having doubts like in like a relationship. He sings on it like, do you love me? It's dangerous to answer in the dark. Do you need me? Negotiate that spark. Anticipate an impulse. Tell me what I'm supposed to do. So yeah, like it's a really good song. Again, it features a great solo like from Costello. As I said, I'm not an expert on some of like these later albums, but again, I reckon it's certainly rare for him to do like a guitar solo now, like on like one of his albums. But it just sounds great. And then again, you've got a really powerful vocal performance. So it's a real comeback, this album for me. And yeah, like this song like in particular like just shows that he's still got it basically. So yeah, this track would get a 9 out of 10. Turn the red rose, paint the red rose. Next next one up is called Paint the Red Rose Blue. Now, this was one of the preview tracks, or singles, from, the album. And it is the first kind of slower ballad, on the album. And, yeah, although it was a kind of preview track, and I did hear it played quite a bit, on, the radio here, in, the UK, I just think it's a bit bland, as a song, and it's really not representative, of the album. I possibly think a lot of people might have heard this song and just think, oh, he's just doing the same kind of thing, which he's kind of done, for, the last few years, just slightly sleepy ballads. And it's just a bit straight ahead, in, its structure. Lyrically, it reminds me a lot of, A Good Year for the Roses. Of course, I know he, didn't write that song, but it is one of his biggest hits, and it's, it's kind of a very kind of similar lyrical themes, and so, in terms of musical style, it has got this kind of melancholic kind of country flavour to it. So for me, it's just a song that just doesn't fit on the album. It might grow on me. It might just be because it's a ballad and surrounded by more upbeat rocking songs that it's just maybe not quite stood out to me yet. But yeah, I do just think it is slightly misplaced on the album. I think it would have fitted a lot better on Look Now, for instance. So yeah, but for me, would get a 6 out of 10. Yeah, I'm just not too keen on that song. Next one up now is called Mistook Me for a Friend, and we're back to kind of more upbeat tracks now. And this one, again, you've got slightly rawer instrumentation on this one here. It does sound, this is a track for me which does sound like you've just got the band playing together live in the studio, but crucially is still incredibly well produced. Sebastian Crispin, a fantastic job. All the instruments sound really fantastic, but it's not overproduced, it's not over layered with sounds an instrument. Very much reminded me of his best work from the 70s and early 80s. The chorus line is really catchy. It's full of hooks, this song, where he sings on it, I was working chemicals for petty cash and chemicals, dealt in the invisible, somehow close to criminal. That whole bit where he's just sort of spitting that line out again, it reminds me a lot of, again, material on this year's Model, things like Pump It Up and that. For me, one of his best songs he's done in years. So yeah, for me, Mistook Me for a Friend would get a 10 out of 10, and yeah, would have been a much better second single from the album. You are my most beautiful mistake. But the next track up is equally good, and it's a slightly different vibe. It's called My Most Beautiful Mistake, and musically it's a lot slower, but kind of a slightly soulful kind of flavour to this one. Reminds me quite a bit of Allison, actually, which is one of his all-time classics, although a little bit more kind of fleshed out arrangement. It's certainly a lot longer, this song here. And lyrically, I think it's about a aspiring actress getting used by kind of more experienced male kind of screenwriters, although I'm not sure if that's maybe just a metaphor for something a bit more kind of general. But he kind of sings on it it's not your reputation I'm trying to blemish, I'm here to uncover, I'm writing the screenplay, you might be my inspiration, it's beyond my control. And yeah, it is a bit kind of freewheeling, this song. It reminds me a bit of kind of Bob Dylan's kind of style of writing, where it is kind of generally just a lot of verses, and then you've got a female singer, I forget her name, I think she's Nicole Atkins, I think that might be her name. She does a fantastic job, not quite duetting, but she kind of is there in the song, kind of echoing some of the lines, which gives it a new dynamic for the album. Again, for me, there's just something about it which just engages me. I'm not sure if it's the production, if it's the music, if it's the musical elements of it, or what, but I just really like this song. And yeah, for me, again, we'll get a 10 out of 10. Another, really, really, really great track. It's the way you make me feel magnificent. And now we're at the lead-off single from the album, which is called Magnificent Hurt. Now, I did briefly talk about this song on my top 10 albums of 2021 list, basically saying that this was a massive return to form for Costello. It really blew me away, but at the same time, I didn't want to get my hopes up for the album, because he's done that before, with Look Now and Hey Clockface, a great lead-off single, but then the rest of the album has been a bit of a letdown. Pleased to say, as I said so far, again, in this review, this has not been the case, and yeah, for me, this song is great. This is a kind of old school Elvis track. It's kind of, again, it's got kind of touches of kind of this year's model kind of in there, a kind of bass riff which is very reminiscent like of Pump It Up. But again, like the way the song kind of flows is really good. It's really well written. That bridge section as well, again, very melodic, and he kind of opens up a bit more like emotionally. He sings on it like, but the pain that I felt let me know I'm alive. And I open my heart to the way you make me feel, magnificent hurt. And yeah, it is again a great song. I can't really fault it, to be frankly honest. So yeah, a 10 out of 10 there for me. Unfortunately, that great streak of songs does come to a bit of an end with this next one called The Man You Love to Hate, and this is a kind of more sort of vaudevillian style track. You've got it's kind of like a kind of knees up, everyone kind of singing along like on it. I mean, it's decent, but it is a kind of detour like on the album. You know, we've kind of moved away from like sort of like a kind of like more like rock-based songs, and we've kind of got this. I mean, it's okay on the album, like in the context like of the album, but am I ever going to really play it outside of the album? I wouldn't say so. So yeah, for me, would get a 7 out of 10 for The Man You Love to Hate. The death of magic thinking. Next up is called The Death of Magic Thinking, and this is another one of my favourites on the album. Another upbeat rocking song, this one with a very kind of relentless drum pattern like going through it. Reminds me quite a bit of the track Lover's Walk from the Trust album. Yeah, very kind of relentless, kind of rhythmically. Again, Pete Thomas, again, still a fantastic drummer, like even like this many like years on. And yeah, kind of like lyrically, I think it's maybe about having a kind of sexual experience like at like a young age. He sings on it like, she took my hand in an experiment, put it where it shouldn't be, put it underneath a dress and waited to see. But yeah, again, he sings it really well. You've again got this a bit more kind of multi-textured production wise, but again, it is excellent though. And again, vocally Costello, like at least again, like the studio can like really pull off a fantastic performance, like still. So yeah, The Death of Magic Thinking, another great song, possibly my favourite like on the album, like, but it is quite hard to say, but certainly up there. So yeah, a 10 out of 10 for that one. And they finally trick out the truth. Okay, now the penultimate song is called Trick of the Truth. And this is a more kind of slower bass song, this one here. It's quite reminiscent of some of the tracks like on Hey Clockface, some of the kind of like sort of slightly blander ballads like on like that album. But it is nice, this one though. I do quite like it. I think had it been on that album, it would have just got lost like in like the mix really. But here it stands out because because we've not really got many slow songs like on here. But lyrically, it is a bit weird, this song. It's kind of perhaps about like Halloween. He sings on it like there's witches in the air, jack-o'-lanterns on the stair, and a wig to turn your hair electric blue. And it's kind of, although it is kind of lyrically this kind of slightly nonsense, kind of abstract lyric where he's kind of referencing, well, that, and then he kind of talks about kind of the Marx Brothers and then Godzilla, you know. It is nice to have a slow moment like on the album, like albeit a slightly kind of like sort of like strange, like kind of like lyrical lyrics like go along with it, but get a nice song though. So yeah, for me, Trick of the Truth would get a 7 out of 10. Mr. Crescent. And then to close the album, we get another kind of slower track, which is called Mr. Crescent. And this is a slow song, but a really pleasant track, though. Again, it's about a character who kind of ends up lonely after kind of like some sort of foolish actions. He sings on it, Crescent left me standing there with nothing but you. Don't be fooled now by his bill and coup. You'll be abandoned too. He'll leave you. And again, I like the way the arrangement builds. It just starts off very stripped back, just Costello and like a kind of like acoustic guitar. Reminds me a bit of there's kind of like some early B-sides. Is it maybe Who the Factory? It kind of reminds me a bit of. But then it kind of then sort of like goes in, like it kind of then builds up. The drums come in, and then it keeps the track interesting, I feel. And I think it is a really nice closer there. So that one, yeah, would get an 8 out of 10 from me. And the starboard light is blue. Okay, so overall, this album would score 85%. So I must say, like as I said, truth be told, I did not have brilliant expectations for this album, but this was much better than I could have possibly ever like been hoping for, really, again considering that I've not been a big fan like of like his last couple of albums. For me, I think it doesn't, like, although it does supposedly have this kind of central concept of these kind of growing up songs and sort of like I think he's even mentioned that some of the tracks are kind of about a kind of like that's like an imaginary character like he had, and that you don't kind of need to know all that or have like the accompanying book or anything to just appreciate this album for just being a collection of really fantastic songs. And like certainly like after like his like cancer scare a couple of years ago, he's proved like such an amazing comeback like with like this album. Like it is definitely up there for me like with like his best work. Like I mean, like I'm not gonna try and sort of like say what is better than, I mean, but certainly I'd probably say it's a top 10 album like of his, which I mean considering like he's made 32 records, like isn't like too shabby like at all. I think what makes this album stand out is the mostly upbeat nature of it. I think it just really works. Like his voice, I think suits these kind of songs much more so than kind of slower sort of ballads. And like yeah, again, it's strong melodies. Like on this album, like even like after just a couple of listens, some of the tracks are really catchy. Which again, like is much more than can be said for like some of like his other recent albums. It's almost like he's back working like with Paul McCartney again. Some of the melodies like are that good. In terms of the Imposters' contribution to this album, they remain on top form, especially Pete Thomas, who is a incredible drummer, very creative drummer like as well. He doesn't sort of play what you kind of typically would imagine like the drumming to be. Like again, very creative player. And then of course Steve Naive, like whose keyboard fills remind me of Costello's absolute best work. Like Costello like at like his peak, that really comes through like in like Naive's like keyboard playing. If I maybe had one minor complaint about the album, I'd say it's perhaps a bit too long, 13 tracks. But yeah, it is on like the slightly like longer side, about 55 minutes I think it clocks in at. Like I mean, you could have like maybe taken off a couple of songs, but it's not obvious which ones like you would have like taken off, like to like be frankly honest with you. Like so I do think that it stands up, and as I said, I think could well be like a top 10 album for him, like if like I was like to rank like them all again. So yeah, that's been my review of The Boy Named If. So I hope you have enjoyed the review, and I will see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye.
There's a red alert.